Welcome back to the channel, Real Repairs for Real Customers. This is not going to be a repair video, so if you want to skip this video, I surely understand that. But this video is in response to some comments from folks that wonder why I'm posting these videos. After all, I'm not selling products, so I'm not making any revenue by showing people what products to use. And I'm not looking for new customers. So why post the videos? That's a very valid question, and I empathize with that. Also, who is this guy? Where does he come from? So I thought it might be nice to do a little bit of an introduction and show some of my background in the business and why it is that I've come to present these videos. But really, I thought the best way to introduce myself is through my repairs. I mean, what better way to get to know someone than by the work that they do, especially in this field? Because otherwise, what I say would have absolutely no credibility at all. I'm not sure it does. So the idea was then to present repairs from start to finish, which hardly anyone was doing. And so the idea was to give some background to the repairs, give some of the science behind the repairs, the theory, the method, and to show the method from beginning to end and see how it works out. That way you can see by the end result that the science and the method all were valid. It really does work and can build your confidence and would help the industry overall. In fact, the YouTube videos can help the industry worldwide. So that was the intent on showing the videos and introducing myself in that way. Now maybe it's time to introduce myself personally after a couple of years gone by. The business name is A.R.T, which stands for Advanced Restoration Technologies. Advanced because from the very beginning I wanted to push or help advance the industry in a forward direction. Restoration because more than just repairing something to its functionality, I wanted to bring it back to its original appearance as well. And technologies because I wanted to use some of my science background to help in the understanding and also to help in developing new products and procedures. And what is that background? Well, I was a science major in school, and I scored in the top 3% in the SAT exam nationally and won a full academic scholarship with a view to perhaps becoming a cardiologist. But as life does, things change. So you might ask, what kind of background do I have in repairing stuff? So as a youngster and working with machinery, you can imagine that you had to learn how to repair anything and everything that came along. And there's a lot of math and science involved in field crops and farming. We might have a part that broke down on a piece of machinery, and we'd have to work in the machine shop overnight to actually make the part because we couldn't wait for a week or two for that part to be shipped in. The crop doesn't wait. Time is of the essence. I asked my dad what he was going to do with this old car, and he said he was going to haul it to the junkyard. And I said, what's wrong with it? He said he didn't know, but if I could fix it, I could have it. So it turned out it needed a vacuum modulator on the transmission, so for $7.50, I had my first car. A bunch of body work later, and I was riding in style. Also, in my younger days, I was able to learn engine rebuilding from Tom Fresano, who had built racing car engines. And so under his direction, I would tear them down and put them together according to his very strict specifications. That came in handy later when I had a Ford with a 302 engine where the rear seal actually blew out, and of course I didn't have any money as a youngster, so the idea was I was going to have to repair that myself, which I was able to do it because of my training. So I pulled the engine out with a forklift on a Saturday morning and had a new crankshaft and bottom end bearings and seals put in, and the engine put back together, and the car running by 5 o'clock that evening. Oh, to have the vitality of youth again, huh? Also, back when I didn't have any money, I built my own roll-around tool cabinet. I had some scrap angle iron, which I welded together, some scrap casters, scrap handles, some scrap wood. The only thing I didn't have was the sheet metal for the sides. So I went down to a sheet metal shop and gave them the dimensions, and there you go. They made it up for me, and they gave me the sheet metal, thinking, well, here's a youngster that is building his own toolbox. We're going to help him. So that is the same roll-around cabinet that I have today. That's how it exists in my shop right now. I just can't seem to get rid of this box in favor of a brand new one. So then a good friend of mine since youth, John Tracy, whom you may know as one of the pioneers in the PDR industry here in the States, encouraged me to get into the vinyl repair. And so I went and learned from him how to do a vinyl repair with a heat gun and a graining pad, vinyl repair compound, and I started cold calling the next Monday. Well, my first dealership where I called, I got the response, and I quote, "We don't need any of that crap here." What a way to start. And, besides being sort of a jerk, the salesperson was right. The work was horrible, the work that was being done in my area. And the people were driving run-down cars, and they weren't dressed appropriately, and they were disheveled and uneducated. It didn't speak well for the business. And that's why from the very beginning, I thought that something needed to be done to help the industry overall. And the current going rate for repairs was $15. Well, that's all they were worth, if they were worth anything, of the ones that I saw. So from the very first year, I decided that I was going to help improve the quality of repairs, and I was going to contribute my efforts towards educating industry-wide, even if it meant educating my competition, because the only way we could get money above the $15 mark is for everybody to be doing better work. And that was my goal, getting in even in my first year. So I started right away volunteering to do demos at trade shows. Back then, the trade show was known as the Restyling and Trim Expo, and that was, I believe, started by the legendary Nat Danis. Nat Danis was a stickler for education and for pressing forward in the industry. He was a very forward-looking person. And so when he saw me demonstrating this repair and featuring this series of pictures, he pointed at this and said to me, "This is what the industry needs." So that gave me confidence. Coming from the man Nat Danis, that gave me confidence that I was doing the right thing respecting the industry overall. And from the very beginning, I was determined to offer what was best for the customer and what was best for the automobile, regardless of whether that involved me or not. And the other thing that I was determined is to always treat the customer with dignity and respect. But because we had to travel so far and wide just to make a living back then, I decided to add other services locally so that I could stay more local. So I started up a detail shop and had 3 employees working there with a view to offering something that wasn't being offered locally. In fact, it wasn't very well received initially because the dealers were not accustomed to a detail at that price. They were accustomed to the local slop bucket kind of cleanup guy. But we did well with the customers that we did have, and they were known for having the best cars in town. And we also handled problems like flood damage and paint problems. Another service that I embarked on was bumper repair, and I had a service where the body shops could actually drop a bumper off at my shop, and I would repair it and prime it and have it ready for them to put back on the car, and then they could apply the final paint. But for my other dealers, I reasoned that I could also do a little bit of mobile paint work. And there may very well have been other people doing mobile bumper painting at the time. I didn't know of any. So this was also a brand new thing to offer, is a mobile bumper painting back in the day. Then I decided to team up with a friend of mine, Frank Daly, and we started a sign business. So this also gave us more work locally to do to expand our business. He was in the striping and body side molding business, and so the signs seemed to be a good offshoot from that. So we were the first business locally to offer computer cut vinyl lettering along with the graphics. In fact, this was in the early days. We had a CAD machine that would put out the graphics. That was pretty simple. We didn't have a full-blown artistic software at the time. And so our system came with just one font. And if you remember back in the early days, in the 80s, you would have to purchase fonts, and Gerber was the one that had the fonts available, and so they were very expensive. We didn't have the money to buy fonts, so we had just the one font. So what I decided to do is go to the library and get a book of type styles, and every night I'd come home and I would hand digitize at least 3 letters, and more on the weekend. So there's 26 lowercase, 26 uppercase, numbers, and punctuation. So I did 3 fonts, one without serifs, one with serifs, and then a script font. So now our customers could come in and they had a choice of 4 fonts. That was up until I bought CorelDRAW, which contained many more fonts, and that seemed to make life a whole lot easier. So we produced all kinds of signs, all kinds of graphics. Then we started also doing backlit plexiglass signs. And we would use the same plotter to print out the reverse image, the mirror image that is, of the graphic, so we could spray it on the back side. So this particular sign is the very first one that I did, and this uses one of the graphics that I hand digitized, and that sign looks exactly the same today, some 40 years later. So at the same time we started out the sign company, Frank Daly's son Don was programming chess. Frank wished his son would get a real job, but as it turned out, he became one of the foremost chess computer programmers in the world. He was working at the time with Rex, and that went on to become Rex Chess. And if you've ever played Socrates or click chess or corral chess, you've played Don Daly's chess programming. His latest version was Komodo, which took the 2019 World Computer Chess Championship. Don has since passed away, but his team has gone on to just release the Dragon version of the chess engine, and that has really raised a lot of interest in recent days in the news. So then, as things changed, I decided to close down the detailing aspect of the business in favor of stocking products. There was a company on the West Coast distributing repair products, and so they offered me an opportunity to distribute them on the East Coast. And so I started stocking their products. And so here you can also see some of the bumpers that I had in stock for repair. So I kept the repair business going and the distribution business starting up. Also, at the same time, I developed the 24 karat gold mobile brush plating system, and we offered that around the country. So we were able to travel with that to Las Vegas, Dallas, Hollywood, Stockton, San Francisco. Now, my first month's commission check on the products was $100. So you can see we started out quite small on the East Coast. But by the fourth year, we had done $660,000 in sales. And the way that I was able to do that is by hosting regional seminars. So the idea about the regional seminars was to be closer to the customers, let the customers see the products, and let the customers get introduced to me as well. So we did them in Orlando, Cincinnati, St. Louis, New York, Montreal. In fact, in Montreal, I was able to speak French that I had taken in school. As a matter of fact, in school, I had taken Latin, Spanish, and French. So I was really enjoying language as well. And so it came in handy in traveling. So in Montreal, I enjoyed speaking the French that I learned, although my mind was about to explode after a week there, so I was glad to be back. So you might be wondering, what happened to the distribution business? Well, I came up $40K short on commission payments. So I decided to sever my ties with that particular company at the time and kind of get away from the negative people in my life. And so I took a vacation and took a little bit of a breather. And that breather was attached to a hose down in the Bahamas. So I spent a week down there just getting a fresh frame of mind. Now, at the same time, there were a couple of other business opportunities that were offered to me. And one seemed pretty interesting, but I couldn't come to terms with the guy on the business. So there was a chess set there, and I said, well, let's settle the business over a chess game. And he said, okay. And he had white, so he had home field advantage. So he started right away attacking with the queen, and usually that's not something you want to do. But that forced me into a really solid defense, and I've always enjoyed either the King's Indian or the Queen's Indian defense. So I went with the Queen's Indian defense here, and so there wasn't anything he could do with the queen. That's the kind of defense where the only way really to break it down is to trade off pieces, and then you go into an endgame, usually a king and pawn sort of endgame. But it was impenetrable. And I was watching him make some really careless moves with the queen. And so as it ended up, his king was stuck in the middle of the board. His queen was very active, but I had very active pieces. I had, of course, fianchettoed my queen side bishop, slicing into his king side. I also had the other bishop parallel to that on D6. And I actually had a pawn and a rook anytime I wanted it. But there was the move that really unzipped his king's position, and that was the pawn to F4. And with my queen on H5, I also prevented him from castling queenside. So he was really lost at this point. There was no way to save this game. But he was being so greedy with his queen movements and when he should have been developing. So positioning is of the utmost importance in chess, of course. So as he thought he had his F4 pawn protected, and so I took the F4 pawn, and it looked to him as though it was free for the taking. He should have thought, why am I sacrificing the bishop for a pawn? There must be something afoot here. But greedy as he was, he decided, well, I'm going to take that free bishop. And there he goes. He took it. But what he didn't foresee is that knight to D3 check forks the king and the queen. It doesn't happen that often in chess. It's called a royal fork. So here white was royally forked, and a resignation followed. Well, that still didn't do anything to help the negotiation in the business, so that didn't come to fruition. So I was back in the service business full-time, repairing, and that's where the profit was. I did get offered another opportunity. John Davidson was starting up a new distribution at that time, and he asked me if I would be available to also do seminars for him and some individual training for him. And so I said, yes, of course. And so there I was back in the seminar circuit once again right away. So we did some trade shows. This particular trade show was down in Corpus Christi, and it was one of those shows where everybody was sorry they went. It wasn't very well attended. They said, "Where is everybody?" And you can see where everybody is. So there I was with everybody that was in attendance. That was kind of funny. It doesn't always work that way, but it did happen to this time. So I've always enjoyed meeting people at these events. And certainly if you're going to be doing actual repairs, that garners a lot of attention in these functions. The other thing that I did for the trade shows was to present a slideshow of various repairs. So if anybody came by and asked me about any specific kind of repair, I would have a slide presentation for that particular repair. Also, I made some displays so that the more tactile people could put their hands on some repairs, and this was one of the aircraft seats, which I had refinished just the half of it. Also, I took a BMW seat and demonstrated here with this the baseball stitch, where they could see the full baseball stitch in the middle of a panel, and then they could see a baseball stitch half repaired right in the middle of a panel. And so this was an eye catcher because no one had ever really thought to do this before. And it shows how very possible it is. And of course, you've seen that in the channel already. One of the favorite slideshows, which you saw a glimpse of in that past view, was the sofa recliner where I am also demonstrating the baseball stitch. Here where we have the big tear in the footrest. I didn't know that it was this big because back in the day I didn't get a picture of the damage before going to a residence. Nowadays, if you don't send a picture, I'm not coming. It's so easy to send a photograph in these days and times. But back then it wasn't normally done. So you get there to the residence and you find a surprise like this. So the baseball stitch was the only thing that was going to work on this, of course. And so we anchor the center point, start the baseball stitch. Notice there's no pleat at the end. That completes the left side, and then we have the right side. Gathering everything together, putting the leather back in tension like it was when it was first wrapped tightly and stapled. And then repaired using the ironing method, of course, which flattened the stitching and made it so it wouldn't be visible. In this one, we used some water-based spray grain with some color and a pre-val, giving it a bit of a heavy grain and hiding the repair better. And then with color and the finished product. So this was a very popular slideshow at the trade shows. And on the home front, our work with the aircraft continued to grow, and we were doing work on site. So it might take us, depending on the number of seats and the extent of the damage, we might spend one day there, or we might spend 2 days refinishing the full aircraft. And there were times when we had more time to work and we would actually bring some home, but we didn't have a shop at the time. So that wasn't really very well suited for the aircraft seats. And so we decided at that time that we were really needing to build a shop to accommodate the aircraft seats. Interestingly, at this time, the boys said that they wanted to go to the gym so that they could work out. So I said, I do have some work, and it is out. And so if you will help build the shop, then you can have some equipment. You can have a weight bench. And we ended up, after the shop was built, getting them the weight bench they wanted, and a really nice basketball goal and a ping pong table. So here we are setting one of the walls. I also had a friend come and help me on the construction of this, but certainly put the boys to work. Here's the big boss man surveying. Now what's funny is before the shop was even finished, we had the first arrival of a student for personal training. There, we're starting to get it all put together. And then it came time for landscaping. So if the boys wanted to work out, why, they can lift some blocks. Here I'm scrubbing the excess mortar off with muriatic acid, hydrochloric. And we get the walkway planted. At the very top of the picture, you can see where we initially cut a hole in the wall and put in a patio door. The patio door to nowhere. There was a view to putting the deck there, but we first wanted to build a shop, and the patio door would give us access to the house. And there, the deck finally in place. And the retaining wall around the shop also planted. So it's been a multi-purpose shop. You've seen the videos that I shoot in the shop from time to time. We've also had concerts in the shop, and we've also had a stage play practice in there. Everything I have is designed to be multi-purpose. There's always the right way and then the wrong way, right? One of the highlights of my work as an instructor has been to travel overseas and to experience other people's culture and make friends wherever I go. We made several trips to Taiwan, and in this particular photograph, I remember so well, my plane was broken, and so we had to get transferred to a different airlines, which got me to Taiwan the morning of the seminar instead of the day before. And so they asked me, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to the hotel? And I said, do you have a cup of coffee? Let's go. So we started right in on the seminar. This picture is kind of funny because we were all dressed up, of course, for television and for newspaper photographs. And they wanted to protect my good attire with an apron, and this is the only apron they have, and they were a bit worried about how I would take it. Well, we all had a big laugh. The apron didn't matter to me, and so the show must go on. Here's a couple that did know a little bit of English, so that was very helpful. Otherwise, we had a translator. And here it is in the paper the next morning. And I was also included in some of their advertisements. So this company had acquired the account where some furniture needed to be refinished. And here we're reviewing that. Here is another training class on a subsequent visit. And of course, it's all about the food and the beer. So when you fly into Taiwan, you will likely arrive in Taipei City, which is in the north. And then about halfway down the island is Taichung, and then at the very bottom end, the south end of the island, is Kaohsiung, and this picture was taken there. Kaohsiung is so famous for its seafood, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. If you like seafood, this would be a nice place to visit. In fact, I really enjoyed everything about the city. Then we made 4 trips over to Japan, made many friends over there, and what I particularly enjoyed about this group of Japanese guys is how anxious they were to work. When they come to work, they are ready to go. This is our host, Shinji, and he is doing all of the translating since I didn't know any Japanese at all at this time. But there's a lot that you can do just by demonstrating, and they're quick to pick up. So we get the guys ready, repairing. Each of them have a little piece of this seat to do. And of course, this is their first repair, and they're so happy to have accomplished that. Then, of course, there are the bento boxes for lunch. This is Saeki, and this picture is very interesting because we had a seminar to do, and Saeki and I got together the day before. Now, he knows very little English. Well, he knows more English now. He knew very little English at the time. And of course, I didn't know very much Japanese other than just very conversationally. And so we spent the whole day together doing repairs. And for each step, I made an outline. For each step, I would write out phonetically what the Japanese word for that step was. So then the next day, as we're going about the instruction, Saeki is teaching, and I'm following the list, and I keep reminding him in Japanese what the next step is. And of course, on these trips, you make fast friends. And so the Japanese are famous for their beautiful girls at the car shows. And this particular trade show, they had these painted girls. And so I told my wife, look, she likes me. My wife said, she likes a lot of guys. And that was so funny, I couldn't stop laughing the whole day. So on my last trip to Japan, of course, I got very comfortable traveling around with my Japanese dictionary, and I got a chance to take the bullet train on my way to Hakone Onsen. And this is a very popular spot at the base of Mount Fuji. It's a famous hot springs. And so I wanted to do the traditional Japanese hot spring experience. So we changed trains several times. This is a little train that winds its way up around the mountain. Before boarding this train, by the way, it was kind of funny because I wasn't sure exactly which train was arriving. And so I asked the man if he spoke English. He said he didn't speak English, but he asked me if I spoke French. So here's a Japanese guy and a guy that speaks English conversing in French. We found a way to do it. I got on the right train. Mount Fuji was enveloped in fog. It was cold. It was rainy. But, it was a good day for the hot springs. Let's move on to some of the beauty of Panama. Home of the Diablo Rojo, the Red Devil buses. You don't want to ride those unless you want to take your life in your hands. This is our host there, Carlos, and some eager students. So we had a great time, and we made a couple of trips down there. The second trip, we didn't have a translator at all, but I used what little Spanish that I knew, and they used what little English that they knew, and we got the job done. Here we're doing a little color matching to get ready for these repairs, and you can see the color is dark. So by the time they add white, they will have adjusted the value, and this color will be pretty close. One of the students was also an artist, and this is some that she had on display. In fact, it reminds me that I've had several students who were either professional artists or art teachers. And I've always got such a great response from them on the color matching, how they've learned from my presentation. So that's very reassuring coming from other professional people. This picture was done by June. She was a translator for Chinese. And this is a picture done in a certain style of a famous Chinese artist. And the colors are very subtle here. So while we're doing the color matching demonstration, she is really involved, and she's shaking her head yes, and she's smiling, and I kept having to remind her, you have to translate that for everybody else. She was so engrossed, she forgot to translate. This is a part of a huge wall mural that she did. Back to talking about Panama, of course, they have some wonderful food there. And of course, we made a return trip down there. And so, of course, on the way, we had to visit some of the sites. The Panama Canal. This is Boquete. You might see in the name Boquete, bouquet. And yes, you're right, because this is where they have a festival of flowers and coffee. So we enjoyed visiting there. And don't get the translation wrong. This says, don't step on the grass. But if you got the translation wrong, don't piece on the grass, well, that's okay too. They just don't want the grass to die. Here's a view of some of the transportation the locals have over to this island, some dugout canoes with a motor. The people in the countryside, in Panama are very poor materially. And they have just a very simple house, very simple provisions, usually a garden out back. And there might be some different ways that people in this country, that is in the U.S., would look at this. You might call these people disadvantaged or disenfranchised or apply some term like that. But these people don't view it that way. These people are industrious. They don't have a lot materially, but they are very rich people in character and spiritually. And so we really appreciate them. In fact, they would fight over who would have us for dinner. And it didn't matter who had us for dinner because they would all come anyway. And there's not much room here, so visitors would sit down and eat first, which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. They would stand around and watch, and they would eat after the visitors were finished. What a beautiful people. What's not to love about people like that? We were very privileged to see these people in the rural of Panama. And before we left, of course, we had to go to Panama City and actually spend one night at a hotel. And this man offered us the best pina coladas in the world. How could you say no with that $1 million smile anyway? We had a chance to use the Spanish that we had practiced also in Barcelona. And although my wife got to see a lot of Barcelona, including a lot of Gaudi's architecture there, I didn't get to see that much of what was going on. Here's some more of Gaudi's work. And of course, down the street you have Recycle Man. The street entertainers are quite prolific in Barcelona. And this is why I didn't get to see anything. I'm in a warehouse 14 hours a day for 6 days doing some filming for some repair videos. In fact, speaking of repair videos, I've been featured on many different repair training videos. That's right, going back even to the VHS days. I'm an old timer. I also had the opportunity to do some training down in the island of Curacao off of South America. These are my hosts for the time, which I really enjoyed there. Here's one of the extremely hard workers there, and you can probably tell it's very hot, but very beautiful surroundings. And they're proud of having refinished a couple of really bad worn seats. What I really enjoyed about Curacao is the people there. They speak Papiamento, which is kind of a combination of languages, but the people there do speak a little bit of English and a little bit of Dutch, a little bit of Portuguese. And so it's a kind of a combination of languages that you will hear there. But it doesn't matter because, like every place else, the working people are so friendly and so helpful. A smile is your passport when you travel. This is outside of my room, a nice path over to breakfast every morning. And I spent every evening here. It's such a relaxing place. I wouldn't mind taking a trip back there just for the relaxation. If you're ever in Curacao, you want to try one of their pastici. This is a pastry that's got a filling in it. This is the meat filling. But pastici is always something you want to get. The local food is very good. People are friendly. And that's one thing you learn. Wherever you travel with working people, they're always friendly. Everybody is my brother, except my sister. When you go to the capital city, Willemstad, there is something that people like to go see, and that is the bells. So in addition to traveling overseas, we've also had people visit us in my very humble shop. I hope they weren't disappointed. We've had visitors from Europe, from Central America, from the Far East, and from Australia that come and take some personal training. So it's really been our privilege to host them as well. We had Michelle and George from Taiwan come and visit, and it was a real pleasure to have them. George tried to convince me that these wall murals were real and that he could actually interact with them. Oh, come on. Well, I had to go check it out. And then I found myself slipping into some strange new dimension of the imagination. Then, when George got on the tractor and drove around the block, I pleaded with the man to release us from this twilight zone. One of the repairs we had while George was visiting was this chair, which was a dual-colored chair, and some painters had actually got white overspray, house paint, on the whole thing. So we had to clean this up and re-dye. So I've also enjoyed traveling and instructing at businesses throughout the United States. This one trip took me to Houston, and at this particular large reconditioning facility, I was impressed with the new photo studio that they'd put in. It features a turntable where the vehicle spins around, and then the cameras take pictures at various intervals, and the lights flash at just the right time. And this gets pictures all the way around so that people can go onto a website and see from every angle that vehicle before they buy it. What a great idea. I was very impressed. And of course, while we're in Houston, why not take in a baseball game, especially in the winning season? And with a hot dog and a beer and baseball, everything is okay in the world for a minute or two. That is the nice thing about traveling to the larger cities, the larger metropolitan areas. Generally, you have some sports activities, so whether it's a football game, basketball game, whatever, we can take in some entertainment. In this particular event here, we went to a fight, and right in the middle of that, a hockey game broke out. Also, we did some instruction for a company in Buffalo, New York. And if you're in Buffalo, of course, you got to try their buffalo wings. And incidentally, we were turned on to Danny's original spicy buffalo chicken wing soup. So when it's cold outside, there you go. And so here is Niagara Falls. This is the American side. The Canadian side is all frozen up. So we had to do a return trip instructing also, and so this time we decided to take in the Canadian side, over in Canada. And if you think that's a lot of liquid flowing down, you haven't seen anything yet.
Ready? Go.
Giant pumps. From the floor to ceiling pumps. Big shafts.
Now, I've also been asked to speak before many of the large franchises that you've heard of. And so we've traveled to Kansas City, St. Louis, Arlington, Texas, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Interestingly, though, I seem to be less well received with the franchises. The franchise operations have their own focus, and sometimes being a craftsman is not their focus. Their focus is turning as many units as they can to make as much money as they can in as short amount of time as they can, and doing the least work possible. And so sometimes the craftsmanship approach is not what they want to hear. And then there's the other thing, sometimes people are a bit defensive when someone tries to come in and show them something new. I don't understand why they should have to feel that way. But sometimes people in an organization, they have a certain position, they have an office, they have, oversight of other people, they have a certain status that they look to preserve, and they're not necessarily open to new ideas. And too bad for them, because I've never had anything really to gain from sharing my ideas. But that's the way it goes in big business. The one franchise that I have had the opportunity to speak at for at least 12 years was the Mars franchise when they were down in Arlington, Texas. And they invited me on a couple of occasions to actually go on their annual cruise with them. So on the cruise, I had the opportunity to use my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation, and do some teaching. So we had seminars on the cruise ship. In fact, it seems like we spent the whole cruise answering people's questions. There was one occasion that was kind of funny. My wife and I just wanted to get away for a little bit of quiet time, so we went to the bow of the ship all to ourselves, and I had just told her, well, we're finally off here to ourselves for a little quiet. And as soon as I had said that, we heard, "There he is!" And it was somebody brand new in the business, and there were like a million questions. And so we finally just had to tell them, look, we can't answer all these questions here today, so we'll catch you another time. Even though the Mars franchise has undergone some changes over the years, there is a core group that formed the Mars Nation, and it's really been my privilege to know and work with these individuals over the years. They are technicians that are truly determined to provide the best service available. And so it's been really enjoyable for me to network with them and keep that ongoing through the years. It was from my affiliation here instructing at the Mars seminars that I got to be introduced to and got to know Gary Babinick, whom you know from this channel. And I recognized right away that Gary was someone who felt the same about teaching as I did. And so he's very concerned about helping the industry along. He has a very good way of speaking, which I admire, and which I covet. And so I thought, this guy would be good as an instructor. So I'm happy to say that I was able to get him on as a regular instructor at the same events that I've been going to year after year. And sometimes on our trips, we get to do other things. We try to schedule something else. Here we're at a wine tasting in Northern California, while we're also taking in some of the sights at the Redwood Forest. Gary thought he was a pretty big guy until he stood on the stump of this tree, and that humbled him, as it did everybody that was touring there, myself included. And of course, it's always about getting some good food when you're traveling. Incidentally, Gary doesn't eat sushi, and so we were trying to coax him into it, and we did, and here's evidence that he actually tried it. So he's going to kill me now, but if I come up missing, check with Gary. So I've been a long time on the trade show circuit, and I really do enjoy so much of this, meeting people in the business. And here I am coming into Las Vegas, and Grumpy is there. And so we're setting up for the show. That's so nice to travel, and even the people in the service industry that you meet along the way, it's good to see them from year to year. They become like family too. Then, of course, at the trade show, we get to meet old friends, make some new friends, goof around like I usually do too much of anyway. Here's some former students, and the joy of this kind of a reunion is knowing that they've been working for about 20 years, and it started with what you taught them, and they've been able to put food on their table for that long. They're still so very happy to be in the business. It's a real joy. Here's another former student. So good to have a reunion at the trade shows. Then while I'm traveling, I like to take in some entertainment as well. Also, I was impressed with the workmanship on these saddles. I had a nice conversation with the man. He said that you can't get this kind of workmanship in the States, and that he had to get these saddles imported from Mexico. I don't know the whole story, whether it's economic or whatever, but anyway, nonetheless, the workmanship is something really to be proud of in these saddles. Here we are for another show in Florida. My golf game was so bad the last time, I decided this time I wasn't going to ruin the event. I was just going to drive the cart. So I'm the designated driver. So there's a little bit of some history showing my involvement in the repair business. A little bit of background, so you know where I've come from. So let's stop that there, and we'll have another video, and part 2 will be more about the channel and why we've come to post the videos on the channel. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching.